Okay, so welcome everybody. So today, very exciting, we have Alistair Neller on with us, who is the CEO of Mars Canada that looks after snacking, is it? The
Right.
snacking
Yeah.
Canada, yeah. So thank you so much for being here. This has caused a lot of excitement, and I did want to tell you as well, I have an Instagram account and I just shared it on my stories there, and I had a few people reaching out to me
Oh,
saying,
nice.
gosh, if it's Alistair, I work for Mars. If it's Alistair, he's amazing. He's going to be really great and everything. So that was exciting. You actually
Yeah,
helped.
yeah. That's yeah. I'll have to find out who those people are.
Yeah, I'll let you know after
Yeah.
one of the names anyway. So yeah, so thank you so much for being here. It's so helpful to us. So our Leadership in Life members, they get so much benefit out of having successful people on to really talk about their journey, because you look at people in the C-suite and think, well, how did they do it? How did they get there? Are they human? Have they got the same confidence, and did they get over the same fears and doubts that other people have to get over? So it really helps when we have people like you on to share your journey and share any tips that you've learned along the way that has really helped you develop as a person, and the things that you look out for as well on, like helping other people and leading other people. So thank you so much. It genuinely is helpful, and we really do appreciate it. So to get started, we're just going to
I'm
read the
going to,
bio
yep,
first.
let's get the bio done. So it's a very impressive bio, is this, Alistair? So, Alistair Neller is the CFO of Mars Snacking Canada. His journey with Mars began in operational finance roles in the UK, where he had the opportunity to work closely with the manufacturing teams and really understand how finance connects to day realities of business. Over time, he took on broader roles across planning, strategy, and transformation, moving into leadership positions that required not just technical expertise, but the ability to bring teams together and drive change. A big part of his development came from working cross-functionally, whether in supply, demand, or commercial teams, and this helped shape a more holistic enterprise mindset. His first step into a CFO role came in Canada, where he had the chance to lead through periods of growth, transformation, and integration. Since then, he has continued to build on an experience focusing on aligning strategies, people, and performance to deliver long-term value. On a personal front, he and his wife Tanya are kept busy with Henry 7 and Isla 5, and have recently started to enjoy skiing as a family during the winter months. He is also a serial home renovator, so he's always looking for an opportunity to build or help out friends.
So
Love
That's
it.
that's a lot going on.
that's an impressive bio, but it's also sounds like you're a very handy friend. I kind of like that.
Yeah, I tried. Yeah, I tried to be. Yeah, I get a few phone calls here or there. So yeah, if I've got a bit of time, I'm more than happy to help.
Amazing. So we're going to start off with a question that we ask all of our guest speakers. So if you can just talk us through your career journey, and did you envision it to turn out this way,
Hmm.
or were there kind of like turns, and did it evolve in unexpected ways along the way?
Yeah, yeah. I think all of the above, right? I think both you, Amy, and Nigel have just kind of said a couple of things there that just resonated with me anyway. Whenever look back at the career journey that I've had. One of those being, I think, I mean, even when I first chatted with Nigel, I just love this concept of being able to kind of share experiences, kind of irrelevant of level of where you're at with anybody, because I don't think I had that. So I don't know whether I really thought that when you started a career in finance, you would end up as a CFO, or you would end up kind of within a leadership team. And I think the reality is, I think that not to kind of get too much into the detail of it, but sometimes being there at the right place, right time, and kind of just just putting your hand up, kind of looking like you're willing, and looking like the next opportunity might be the experience to continue to develop you has kind of served me well. But yeah, I definitely don't think I set out to kind of get here, mainly because I don't know whether I had anyone ever telling me exactly how you would ever get there, right? Or what it meant to go do this job. And I think that I had the same, you just said it there, Amy. I think I had the same feeling when I was coming through my career. I'd look at people and they would be in these positions, and you'd be like, these guys must be like, they must, he or she must just be they're so intelligent. They must be on just like other levels compared to other people, that like what on earth would it take to kind of get there, right? Like they must, I never thought that people like would know somebody that got them there. I always thought people got there on merit, but I just we assumed that people got there because of just their kind of top 1% of ability in that space, whether it be finance or supply chain or general management or whatever the function was. I just assumed that that's what it was, right? And so yeah, I don't know whether it ever really struck me. I think I always had good desire and good drive to go figure out what's the next thing for me. And some of that just comes with wanting to keep busy, like you just kind of mentioned there. Like I want to keep busy, whether it's inside, outside of work. So I've always wanted to be busy, always wanted to take more on, always wanted to learn, always wanted to figure out kind of from other people, experts or the other people in the field, like how I can continue to develop. But yeah, I just don't know whether I think not by accident, I think it's by purpose, but I just don't know early on in the career whether you really have or I didn't at least anyway, you had that level of support to just kind of really help you understand what these roles are and what it takes to get there, right? So this is why, yeah, I would love the opportunity. If one person takes something away from it, then it's time well spent, right?
I'm pretty sure that there'll be plenty to take away. So, like, where did your career start then? Like,
Yeah.
did you start off thinking, right, I'm going to be in finance? You kind of, you studied finance and everything, and did you just climb up the ladder in a straight line, or did it take kind of twists?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think I remember vividly a career conversation with my parents. From the UK. One was worked on boats, and the other one was in the NHS, kind of the kind of nurse kind of medical field for the kind of my mum's duration of her career. So I think that what I got told was I was decent at math, and accountants could maybe earn some decent money at some point. And so that would be a good career. I think that's the extent of, from where I grew up in England and kind of the career advice that was offered to me. I think that was really the extent of what I got.
That was my advice.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So I think that's changed a lot. I love seeing, lots of the co-ops or interns that we have come into the business now where, they seem to be, I mean, maybe it's too much. They seem to be surrounded by advice. Right. And so, it's a very different environment. I think for me, then I went, like you say, I went off to university, did my accounting and finance degree. Probably wasn't worth that much of the paper it was written on by the time I finished it, but it did get me a job, right? And I think the thing that kind of helped me was I always had good ability to go get a job, kind of during summers, during really kind of early on, where you could. I always wanted to work, and that helped me get kind of experience that ultimately landed me a job in. Kind of small to medium accountancy and audit practice. So, I did that. That was some great experience. That they actually sponsored me or kind of contracted me to go get a job in Switzerland. So I worked and lived in Geneva for a period of time. Again, doing auditing. I think good. I always told myself kind of good foundational, kind of work hard. 12+ hour days. That was the environment. That was what you kind of taught you a bit of the work ethic and taught you the fundamentals of some of the accounting and finance, right? And then that experience, that kind of willingness to kind of go do that, I think really allowed me to then ultimately get accepted and move into Mars, right? So that's where my career started at Mars. I've been with Mars for 15 years now. And that's, I look back and I think some of that just willingness, that kind of work ethic really early on in my career kind of just helped me kind of land that job. Actually up in Birstall, a place called Birstall in West Yorkshire near Leeds. And so I was working at a manufacturing site. I know you guys know it well, right? So yeah, it was, great opportunity. It was, and then quickly just kind of, an opportunity came after that, And then, in the next kind of 8 years or so, had the opportunity to move almost every 12 months, right? Almost every year there was something that, whether someone moved on or there was, you got comfortable with the job that you had and then therefore kind of put your hand up. So yeah, definitely lots of twists and turns. I don't know whether really, I mean, my current role, definitely, that was one thing that when I had visibility to it, I was like, I think I can get this. I want to kind of go after it. But before that, it was really just around, really relying on people close to me or people who I kind of really trusted with their experiences, some good CFOs, some good mentors to be like, yeah, you should kind of go do this. You should maybe in Mars look at a different segment. I started in pet care, then went to what was the chocolate business and is now the confectionery and now the snacking business. And you should, starting in a factory manufacturing line, you should go do a demand. So you should go, talk more to sales or the marketing team and business partner those folks. So I think I relied a lot, within that Mars network, which I think is fantastic. What we have internally is just those people that can give you their experiences or their, direction in terms of where you should go. So I feel very lucky in terms of having the ability to lean on lots of folks kind of during my career. But again, I remember saying this to Nigel when we first met. It's one of those things where everyone's willing to give you advice, right? Everyone's willing to give you feedback and their perspective. And I think that's where you can really help yourself, is just take what you want from it, take the 1% from lots of people, is how I work, to then kind of build up your own view as to where you go after that. So that's kind of where it twists and turns. The move to Canada came because I was looking for some internationally. It made sense personally to look at a relocation, and Canada was kind of top of the list. So that just worked out. Again, right place at the right time. Someone had left a role in Canada. I managed to move into it, and then being here for the last 8 years or so has given great opportunities again to move to different segments, be involved in some great global or local, regional transformational work, different segments, and then now this role. So just lots of twists and turns, lots of unexpected things, and just lots of good opportunities. Like I say, putting your hand up and just looking for that next experience. I think that piece around experience has been, looking back, being critical to figure out what the next role is.
Amazing.
Yeah, I think what you touched on there, Alice, is a really good way, just taking the 1% from different people that you come across. Because I know in my career, I always look at leaders and think, what part from that would I like to take on board? Because I don't no such thing as a perfect leader, but if you can just pull little parts and kind of manufacture this little model of how you do things,
manufacture yourself.
Yeah. I think that's so true, right? I just think I don't know whether I don't think I've ever really had like a mentor who's like long. I hear people, and I'm jealous of people who've had these long-standing mentors for 5-10 years, right? I don't know whether I've ever really had that. There's probably 3 or 4 people that I know I'd really rely on. Like, I know if maybe I haven't spoken to them for a good chunk of time, and that's probably on me. That's an opportunity for me, right? But I think that there's 3 or 4 people that if I really came down to it and I needed help with a decision, that I'd call them, right? Because I know that I trust them with just their experiences, or how they could be able to articulate maybe what could be the right thing for me. So I think I look for those networks and look for those types of people. But yeah, I think you've got to take responsibility yourself for how you want to be viewed. And I remember someone telling me, which I don't massively like, but I remember someone was like, what's your brand? And trying to kind of push you into that arena. I struggle with a bit of that. But I some of it's true, right? Like, what do you want to go stand for? And then what do you want to take from your experiences?
Yeah. Was there one or can you think of one moment when it was kind of a bit of a pivotal point in your career? Obviously, you've seen a lot in so far, but is there one thing that jumps out that thinks, the decision I made then, or by taking that role, or by doing that, really did turn, or it could even be a call, a meeting, time spent with someone, really did turn the direction of my career or to where you are now?
Yeah, there's probably a few, right? Like there's maybe one which is a bit of a developmental piece for me. I think, and I massively thank the CFO at the time when I was in the chocolate business based in London. I think he gave me some just really, really great direct feedback, which I think sometimes not many people. Sometimes you don't really want to hear that, right? But he just gave me some great feedback, because it was like, I think you're overusing this idea that you have to have the answer all the time, right? And I think that was breakthrough for me. I think in terms of, I felt like, midpoint in my career, I was like, if someone more senior is asking me a question, the expectation is that I have the answer. And so then I'm gonna go. I'll make something up, even if I don't know it. I'll try to kind of bluff my way through. I'll try to black my way through it and try to kind of give an answer as much as I possibly can do. And you know, he was just like, look, the risk of that is that people are going to just think that you're a bit of a know-it-all, or you think that you know it all. Whereas in fact, it's a lot more powerful to kind of just turn around and say you don't know, and you'll go figure it out. And for me, it came from a place of I felt like I wasn't allowed to do that. So I think that I didn't feel like I was allowed to kind of say to someone, well, I don't know the answer. Because to me, that was maybe a bit of weakness, right? Like, am I showing weakness that I don't know what I'm doing, or I don't know the answer to something? So great advice, solid advice, stuck with me. That's again 1%. I mean, he was a great manager, still is, in the Mars network, but great guy, great line manager. Wasn't my manager at the time, but just sticks with me because that was a piece of advice he gave me. And from then, it was a bit of a release, or a bit of a just a like you could kind of take a bit of a breath and feel like you could be a bit more of yourself rather than trying to portray this image that you had everything right, like you had all bases covered. So things like that stick out, right? Is like a developmental maybe experience.
I'm smiling, Alistair, because this honestly, exactly what you just talked about there held me back in my early career for so many years. I was so nervous about going into meetings because if somebody asked me that question when I didn't know the answer, so I'd
Yeah.
actually stay at the back and I'd stay hidden because I didn't know all the answers. And then I was really lucky as well. I was working for a company called International Procurement Logistics in West Yorkshire as well, in the UK. And we came over to, we kind of came to Canada with them, and I was doing a project with them, and I was lucky enough to be like sat in the car with the CEO then, and we got chatting about this. And she turned around to me and said, "Oh my goodness, I outsource my memory. I would never go in knowing all the answers, and I'd never expect anybody to know it." She said, "Whenever I don't know, I just say, let me refresh my memory and I'll get back to you. If I don't know, I'll go and figure it out." And I was
Yeah.
like, "Oh my gosh, am I allowed to say that?" And she's like,
Yeah.
"Yeah."
Yeah.
And
I
it was
just don't think
like,
I think
that
lots
was
of
a game
people,
changer.
yeah, that like permission to go and again, I think I'm always questioning myself whether that's something that people suffer from now, because just generations change, right? And how people approach business and whatnot changes. So I do think that still is a barrier for lots of people. So yeah, I think and for me it was, right? Like for me that was one thing that, you know, probably for a period, yeah, I think it could have, I don't know whether it did up until that point, but I think if I hadn't have taken that seriously and been like, no, I appreciate that, like you're absolutely right, I could have gone the other way and said, well, what do you know, like whatever. Then I think that would have and could have held me back, right? So again, you've got to sometimes take these things on the chin a little bit and just realize that you have to let them soak in and realize that, yeah, maybe I haven't got it quite all right, and I need to kind of adjust a little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
love it. Can you share with us a fear or a self-doubt or something that's been a challenge to you through your career, whether it be public speaking, imposter syndrome, anything like that? And if you did have some of these, what would you recommend the best way to attack them and best way to try and overcome them?
Yeah, I think maybe Amy, I was the same, where somewhat just follow on from what I was discussing, but I wouldn't want to, I could never ask a question, right? I could never ask a question in public. And some of it just came from the fact that I just felt like, well, why would anyone want to listen to me, or why would I have? Because again, you know, there's a bit of imposter syndrome, but you know, I don't like to sound like I'm so kind of hard done to, but I just feel like that maybe I just didn't feel like you know, again, thinking that everyone's in these positions, so they must be really clever, or they must kind of have all the answers. So I remember being just, you know, so incredibly nervous, like really on edge of like, am I gonna say something? Like, there's an hour meeting. If I, you know, is it going to be half an hour before I say something? Is it going to be 40 minutes? Like, you'd be watching the clock to see whether you'd be saying something, right? So I think that I really internally struggled with. I don't know whether people saw it so much. I remember one boss at the time, for a short period of time, was like, you know, we had a global visitor come to the site, or whatever it looked like, some more senior figure, and he was like, I'm gonna if you have to ask a question during this town hall. And I was like, no, never. I can't do that, right? So I'm gonna try and hide even further back, or I might even be sick that day. So I remember standing there very vividly, and he was like, no, like even if you don't ask me, I'm going to point to you and say, oh, Alistair's got a question. Which I do not. I think this was possibly the worst type of line management you could ever gone down, right? Like, and he didn't do it, but that just the fear of potentially having to say something publicly, or the fear of having to get that out, was just like just insane, just exponential, just the worry or fear that I had. And look, I don't know whether I think for me, how I ended up kind of getting over it a bit was there's two things really that I think stand out. I think first of all, like in those meeting environments, I think even just saying hey, or just saying hi, or how is everybody, and getting that initial like vocal kind of chord out, and sets just like level of comfort. I've said something, it's now not going to be in the back of my mind, and so I'm okay with it. And it's a very normal thing. You're not talking anything business, you're not really talking about anything that's related to the subject or topic of the meeting, but you are just breaking that down instantly, where you're introducing yourself just by saying hi, right? Like you've said something, people know that you've got a bit of a voice. So I think early on, I kind of use that as my instant kind of, mechanic to try to be much more comfortable in an environment. And it's surprising how much that works. And it's also, I guess, not surprising, but how many times I've told that to other people, and they've been like, oh, it's amazing. Just, it's incredible how quickly that can just help me, settle myself in an environment. And again, it's not rocket science, right? It's literally just it's being human in some ways, of just being able to, how do you talk to people? How do you converse with people? And then the second piece, I think, came later on in my career, and maybe a little bit more with just where you get into senior positions, is just realizing that you can be yourself, and being your true self in environments actually helps you be much better and much more authentic to teams, to businesses, to people you interact with maybe once a year, twice a year. I think just understanding that you can kind of be yourself. I'm lucky because I work for a company that really allows people to be themselves. But again, it took me a while to realize that I could be myself, and laugh and joke, and maybe try to make light of some situations, and just be casual and be yourself. I think when you get to that point, you can then really accelerate, because you just recognize or realize that that's not a barrier. It shouldn't be a barrier in anyone's kind of professional life. And can then really just accelerate yourself in terms of how much you enjoy kind of going to work, just the comfort level you have around everybody you meet through different forums, etc. Right. So I think that's the piece that really stands out for me. And probably if I was to go talk to myself 10 years ago, there's no way that they would have believed that you can kind of turn into that place where you can be really comfortable in any situation you get thrown into, right?
Yeah, that is absolutely golden, honestly, and it's something that like I'm teaching across social media right now, because I was exactly the same, in exactly the same place, and what you just described there of that first walking into a meeting room and hearing your own voice, that was exactly the starting point that helped me. And then the second thing that really helped me from that is I started focusing on the other person. Whenever I was speaking in a room, in a meeting, presentation, that kind of concept of audience first, I put that into play in my mind of, well, what does the person leading the meeting need from me to make them feel better? And what does the team and everybody in that meeting need to walk out of here with clarity? So I turned it round to other people and tried to become the clarity provider. And it stopped me thinking about me inside and spiraling inside. But what you described there as well, I actually did have somebody that did call me out and made me ask a question. And I remember it so vividly, because it was probably one of the worst days at work of my life.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think we had this. I think it sounds like we had exactly the same. Maybe we had the same line manager, but yeah, I had the same experience, and it's horrible to feel like that, right? But now it wouldn't be a problem. But it just, because you get to understand how to kind of, these little tricks or tips to kind of get yourself through it, right?
Yeah. And while we're on that conversation, how did that how did you notice that kind of getting over that impact, like your life as a whole and your life quality and what you were taking back to your family each day? How did that shift and getting over that affect the rest of your life?
Yeah, I think it's a big deal, right? I mean, everyone spends so much time at work, and it's such a big part of just your everyone's life in terms of how it can impact you. I think for me, it was the real start of between that and just understanding this idea of being able to say no. I think that was for me the start of just being able to recognize that you could be yourself, right, and not try to be. You could. I was definitely myself, but then you were yourself with in certain environments, and then and then maybe. And I do think there's a part of this which still has to stand true, right? Is if you're in certain arenas, then yes, you have to recognize the audience that you're presenting to, or recognize the people that you're with, and make sure that you're kind of attuned to that. But I definitely think it just allowed me to really enjoy it, really enjoy just kind of the work, the experiences that I could see being potentially, in kind of my grasp, and then going after them, right? So it just helped me kind of maybe push me on or accelerate that next phase. Whereas before, it really early on, you were relying on just the ability to, kind of drive for results, be really quick, work ethic, and kind of grind through stuff. And that could give you a bit of an advantage. I think kind of after that, it was really just around, well, how can you then, take that becomes your foundation. But then like, how do you continue to then build on these other experience, these other development areas that then again can help you accelerate and can help you be seen by others that, if we put Alistair in this role, that's a promotion or a different function or a different area, he'll be fine and he'll continue to deliver for the business. And that way, mutual in terms of experience for me and benefit for the business. So I think that's where it really unlocked just the energy that you continue to kind of bring every day to work, right?
Yeah, 100%. That is some golden nuggets right there. So I want to ask if there was a moment where you were observing somebody else throughout your career. You've talked about the fact that you're lucky enough to have a lot of like not mentors, but people that you could rely on and people that gave you some tips and advice. So was there ever a point where you were observing somebody else, whether this was an inspiring person or maybe a difficult person, but observing them fundamentally changed how you showed up as a leader?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, tons of inspirational people as I've had the pleasure of working with, just in terms of, again, you would take something just from them, right? Like that one piece from them, right? But we've had some great experiences of, in Europe, some of the CFOs there. I just think that we're just so keyed into understanding what was going on, not just within their remit, and then just the more of the environmental understanding of what's going on in different parts of the business, that they could then quickly bring that and replicate that into their kind of work life or their priorities. I've had other people, more recently, again from the kind of the CFO lens, just this idea of just understanding the external environment, where prior to that you were very focused within your kind of your business, your company, which is again right thing to do. But there's just this idea of like, what's going on in the world, like how do you understand trends, environmental things that are happening, business environment, and then relate that back to what might be risks, opportunities, pressures that could kind of face the business as well, right? So just really inspiration from that on that front. I think more on the softer side of things, just this idea of how do you turn strategies into how do you turn global strategies, regional strategies into things that can then be localized, in my case kind of Canadianized, and then taken and really resonate with people as well. Some really great inspirational examples as to like how do you be mindful of how do you when you talk to large audiences, how do you really make sure that you're repetitive, you're clear on one or two big things, rather than talking too broadly and getting people lost, and just recognizing that bigger audience that it gets, the clearer you have to be in terms of the narrative, the kind of message track that you have, and lots of repetition involved in that. And so Yeah, I just, few examples there, but just some good examples of people that have just been really, really great at skills. And how do you, as you go through your career, just really make sure you pick up on those pieces. The time that you have spent with those people, because lots of time they move on because they're probably pretty good. Oh, they are really good. And how do you just then get that from them, right? How do you get that experience from them? How do you ask them the questions? How do you understand how their mind works in terms of processing or approaching a situation? And so, yeah, I just think that's the other piece, right? Just make sure you take the time from those individuals whilst you've got them there. If you identify it, right? It's one thing identifying it. I think lots of people can do that and say, oh, like, someone, this X, Y, and Z is really great at presenting. Such and such is great line manager, great with teams, great team building, great at listening, great at, understanding what's going on in the world, etc., and bringing that back. So I think it's just critical that you recognize that, but then you've got to follow through with it, right? You've got to ask them, you've got to understand from them, because you're never maybe going to really fully understand their perspective of how they do it, because most likely they're going to make it look pretty easy. So I think that's really important. You gotta kind of be bold enough to go ask the question and have the conversation with them, right?
Mm. So obviously you've now built this career, Alex, this great career, and you've learned from a lot of people, different areas, different countries. Now that you're in the position of the CFO and you've got a lot of people that are looking up to you or that are reporting into you, what's your leadership style? What are like the three things that you are conscious of that as a leader now I have to be doing this on a daily, weekly, monthly, kind of yearly basis?
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me the thing that I always want to try to do is at least be relatable, right? Like I want to make sure that what people see if I'm presenting something, they probably get in a good sense as to who I am, right? So I try to stay, it sounds real corny, but like I want to stay relatively true to kind of my roots and want to make sure that people understand that that's who I am, and they're therefore just, as genuine as possible. I think for my kind of, direct team, I want to make sure that I can try to involve them in as much as possible, right? I want to make sure that for them to be effective, just like I need to be effective, it really helps for me to know what's going on, right? So you tend to be in this position now where people will involve you, so you're tending to be pulled into things rather than trying to push yourself into things. So I'll always have that on my mind, is how do I always, pull them or just let them know what's going on, make sure that they have as much understanding as I do or as much as I can give them, so they can be really effective as they go into lots of my teams are in these cross-functional roles where they're managing different stakeholders across different functions outside of finance. So the more that they can know, the more that they can be informed. I think for me, the more that they can be really, really, influential, like, they can really influence and, be influential in terms of those different forums or different topics, different meetings that they go into, right? So that would be the other piece. And then maybe kind of the last piece that, I do want to, make sure that people, find or see the ability to, come back to that piece around just being yourself, whether that's, bring a lot of energy into the workplace, trying to make sure that it's serious, but it's sort of fun in the same way that you've got to enjoy being there. And by being and enjoying being in there, you're gonna get the most out of people, and you'll get the most out of me if I can enjoy myself being there. And so I try to be relatively, approachable and like relatable, as well as making sure that I can arm my team with as much information as possible that I can humanly give them, that they can then go be really effective. So I don't know whether people would agree with me, but it's difficult to look at yourself and say this is what I want to go do, right? But that's, yeah, for me, I think that's what I'd love to be able to at least be known for to some degree, right?
Yeah, I think it's great the thing you touched on there, where you want to be relatable to the people, where they feel comfortable enough to come and chat with you. Because there's so many companies, certainly that I've worked with, and they have this big thing about an open door policy. But like the saying goes, if the people are too scared to cross the door,
Yeah.
so I think it is, a lot of companies preach it, but to actually live and breathe it and get your people thinking that they have got that comfort level, I think it's a huge, huge.
Yeah. For me, look, I look at it like in the way that, again, sometimes sometimes, I won't be involved in conversations around, maybe, things that happen in the business that people think maybe I don't need to know about. And maybe they're right, but sometimes those conversations where if you are, for me at least anyway, if you are relatable and people feel like they can come talk to you, and they also feel like that if I went to go talk to them, they can talk generally pretty freely and provide what's on their mind, what's an update. It just gives you, for me, in these CFO roles, I think you really have to understand, get a pulse of what's going on in the business. So for me, that's where I see it as an opportunity that I can just continue to learn what's going on, right? I only know what's going on because either people are going to tell me or I'm in a meeting where someone's telling me what's going on. So lots of times these, small conversations are exactly where you find out really what's going on, and you can use that just in terms of making decisions in other areas that may be a small influence on that area, right? So I just think it's two-way, right? I think it's highly important for me to get an understanding of what's going on, and then maybe I can pass that information on to somebody else as well. So I just think that openness is critical for sure.
I think that's an amazing point, because we speak so much about psychological safety in a work environment, and that's the biggest point, is the communication. If it's not psychologically safe, people won't share ideas, failings, and concerns. So
and just listening to you, Alistair, because it's my world. I was in Walmart for 10 years, and then I went to work for a company where we were consulting for Sam's Club US, and so I've been in the world. I'm a CPA. I've been in that world that you're talking about, and having somebody like a CFO that is approachable, that actually gives you the detail and wants the people, wants the teams to win by having all the detail present and listening to the, especially when you're helping different business units, it's very challenging to bring so many different people's thoughts and all the different ideas that people have got and bring them together and then try and structure them and make sense out of them. And I feel like that was the role a lot of the time for senior people in finance. Yeah. And so you do need that support. So to me, what you're explaining, it sounds like you're a great leader. So.
Yeah, I'd hate to say that I am, just because I'm not going to be the judge of it, right? But I mean, everyone else can. Everyone else who they can judge me. I'm fine with that. I think that's how it should be, right? But yeah, at least that's what I try to do. Sorry, Nigel.
The modesty is a great sign of leadership.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, again, I think it's some of it. Again, back to that kind of just how you grow up and that kind of background. I think that's where I come from, right? So I think that's where you want to try to be. I think I'm the same way. I think you've always got to recognize that there are always two ways to things, right? I've seen people that maybe I haven't thought would be the most modest or the most humble, but they've done really well, right? And they've done really well because they've been to some degree. You've got to realize you've got to play it off and make sure you're not overusing it, but they've had great ability to sell themselves, right? And they've had great ability to give people confidence that they can go off and go do the next thing. So I do think you've got to make sure that you recognize the pros and cons, and it's balance, right? You've got to find that balance around all of these different behaviors, around what's going to work for you personally. How do you stay true to yourself? But then sometimes you do have to push yourself in areas that maybe is not so natural, but you recognize it can be a strength or can be perceived strength in other areas as well, right? So I'm not saying go off and start singing your own praises, but you got to recognize that in some cases that's what's going to help, right? If you go for a job interview, anyone goes for a job interview, you've got to be pretty confident. You've got to show up. I remember someone telling me, you've got to show up like you want it. You've got to show up like you need it, because otherwise people are going to see that, right? When you're being recruited for a role. So things like that, you've got to just recognize, again, the environment, the audience, and the times to maybe flex a little bit as well.
Mm-hmm. Amazing.
You certainly don't want to go for a job interview and say I'm good, but there's probably better people out there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you don't want to be too humble when you go for a job interview. You've got to sell yourself to some degree, right?
Well, as a final closing question, because we're kind of coming up to an end, and this has been brilliant, honestly. But if there's anything that we've not touched on, or any thoughts that you can leave with our members, maybe for people that are feeling they're not quite feeling they're capable, but they feel held back maybe by some personal fears, like, self-awareness kind of issues that they're working through. Is there anything that you would leave for them, any perspective or reminder that you might have wished you'd have heard earlier on in your career journey?
Yeah, there's probably lots of stuff that I kind of touched on already, right? Maybe one thing that I haven't spoken a little bit about is just obviously there is an onus on yourself to just try to understand and identify where it is that you need help or guidance, or where it is you want to go kind of from and to, right? Again, I think super lucky that I work for a company that has this culture of help in identifying those areas and then working through them. So, but I do think that that's a skill in itself. And probably looking back, it was probably something that maybe served me well, where I was okay with articulating where I wasn't maybe great at something and where I wanted to get to. And so it takes a lot to do that. I don't think it's very easy. I think it's sometimes it's a bit of an oddity to try to kind of say, well, I'm not great at something, and so therefore, and I'm going to go talk to someone about not being great at something, right? So I think just getting into that rhythm of really challenging yourself in that space around, well, what is it that I want? It doesn't mean that you can't do the job. It doesn't mean that you can't kind of progress within that space. I've some great examples of seeing people, outside of myself, but seeing some great people that have been like, look, I'm so bad at this. They haven't said that, but like they've said, this is an area where I really want to go help myself and go learn. And great, let's go figure out what it is that it's going to kind of get you there. And these people, you would never know that was ever a thing that bothered them at one point in their career, right? So I think don't get hung up on these things being major blockers. I think the reality is we can all learn, we can all figure out, we can all kind of develop, but you've got to take a bit of that. You got to take a lot of that onus yourself to understand what it is, and go seek the people that are going to be the people that can help you with that. So I know we've spoken a lot about kind of development areas, less kind of more on the business front, but I think that's the reality of what can kind of help you progress lots of the time, right, through your career.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Excellent.
Brilliant. Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome.
Perfect thing to end on. Thank you so much, Alistair. This has honestly been brilliant, and it's super helpful, like I say, to our members to be able to see the human side and hear your story, and then reflect back on, oh, okay, I can see myself in those patterns, and you've still got to where you've got to, and being able to overcome those and challenge yourself. So it really is so helpful to hear these stories. So thank you so much for coming
Yeah, I
on.
love that.
We really, really appreciate it. And we will end the recording there.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Amazing.
Alistair.